I think it's really easy to feel like what you think, what you feel, who you are, what you're about. I think it's easy to be filled with self-doubt today, when everything becomes universal, right? When there's a lot of groupthink and conformist ideology, it's very easy to doubt yourself. It's very easy to doubt yourself when you want to push the grain. I think a lot of people say, oh, I'm pushing the grain. I'm going against the grain. And it's like, it's seen as something that is desired. But quite frankly, I think that there's no greater venture, right? And nothing that takes more courage than like being yourself. You know what I mean? Especially today, especially for the world to see. And you're just kind of like this person who's not really built for that, right? Like there was a point in time where, to be like a celebrity, sometimes there was, a lot of preparation in that, right? Like a lot of unique experiences that were not synonymous with those who were in that age group. And today, anybody can be an influencer. Anybody can, Hey guys, and Happy New Year. I'm sitting here, my mic died, so I'm just kind of going to be doing this pod like I usually do. And I recorded earlier, and I was just thinking to myself about this year, the trajectory of, broadcasting and, using this platform to really develop my public speaking skills and taking a break and, really trying to discern and decipher my why with podcasting. I remember when I first started podcasting, there was definitely like moments with Earthen's Den, right? The prior brand, which honestly, I really like Earthen's Den a lot more than Renaissance Room. We're going to get into that today when we talk about personal branding and just like this very interesting journey that this journey that I embarked on, which is entrepreneurship. So, but my premise is what I'm saying is I remember thinking to myself, I was like, man, I don't really know if I'm an entrepreneur. I was like, I'm just an artist. I'm doing what it is that I love. And I really felt as though I was able to kind of remain authentic. And so, I deleted this podcast, came back, felt so many different type of ways after life and the changes that I went through in my life, which I have no regrets. I think that life just has a way of teaching us. And it's funny because I think, when you're in your 20s or when you're someone who's trying something or when you're just simply living life and you're aware and you're a student to life, I think you inevitably are going to have a constant. And I think if you have a constant, for some people that's faith, for some people, that's painting, for me, it's writing. There's something about that constant that just really holds you. You know what I mean? And man, I just feel like it's been a really crazy journey. So I say Happy New Year because I just feel like a lot of times things come kind of like full circle. But yeah, I really feel like through my journey of like entrepreneurship and, identifying with that, right? Because at first I'm like, no, I'm a hobbyist. I wasn't really, taking it that serious. I just really enjoyed podcasting. Like I enjoyed making podcast videos, talking to people, connecting with people, sharing light and inspiration. And I remember the moment that I was like, okay, I'm going to take this to the next level and I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I felt this surmountable pressure to really like go and do all these different things. And in the midst of that, I really lost myself. And I don't think it's because I was pursuing entrepreneurship. I just think that there's really something said about success and who you have to become when you don't define your version of success. So, when I first started Earthen's Den, it was about love, light, meditations. You know what I mean? It was a self-improvement podcast, but I was really at a higher frequency. I was about love. I was in alignment with my values. I was in alignment with, what I felt like was true to me, but I wasn't in it for the money. I wasn't trying to monetize my podcast, right? I wasn't pressed for it because I'm like, what? I just love this. Like, this feels really good. I remember being in my studio apartment, downtown on Main Street. I was so proud of myself. I had the place, it was like my interior was really mirroring something that was in like New York. And looking back at my apartment, it definitely really gave New York studio vibes, but that's what I wanted in my mind. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to New York. I really wasn't sure what, that journey would be. At the time, I felt like I could have taken the risk. I had, came into some money and, I could have taken the risk and moved to New York. I was like, okay, but I was like, man, I really don't know if I want to live with a stranger. Right. So that was my choice. And I was okay with that. And I think I was just kind of in my own journey. And I'm sharing this as a more of a reflective type of thing, like looking back, hindsight. and just kind of sharing this with, my listeners out there. And so, yeah, it was fun for me. It was about inspiration. It was about giving back and pouring into others in that way. And I really felt like I was able to garner authentic audience. But the moment that I said, okay, I'm going to pursue this for money, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to seek capital, that changed everything. I think that there's some challenges that arise in entrepreneurship that a lot of people don't talk about. And the biggest thing is like the personal branding, right? It is the personal branding, and I say branding in the sense of like, you have no idea who you have to become. And, I'm starting to question whether or not that's actually good business advice, because I think people who tell you, your personal brand is what you put out there, and like you shouldn't put it all out there. And don't get me wrong, I think even for myself, there are still certain aspects of my life that I actually don't share with other people. But I feel like there's really something said about people who preach the narrative about personal branding, but they don't really show up as authentic. To me, it's kind of hard to say, okay, I have a personal brand, but I believe in the value of authenticity. You know what I mean? Because I think if you are authentic and if you real, you're going to show up and you just going to be real. You know what I mean? I think when you talk about personal branding, to me, that more so sounds like, okay, I'm going to put on a front rather than, you know what, I'm going to be myself and I'm going to have boundaries when I come online and engage. I'm going to do me. But even still, I feel like if I'm being myself and I'm creating something from this space of authenticity, you go and feel me. And I don't really have to tell you that, because it's like, I think when you're real, when you're sitting with someone, you never even noticed how they didn't tell you about, their mother, being, whatever the case may be, right? Like they never told you about their life in that way. But it's like the moment that you share with them, you felt like it was real. You felt like you related to them and whatever, the conversation was or whatever they shared with you. You know what I mean? Like you never felt for a moment like, oh, I feel left out of the conversation, or I feel like this person's not bringing their whole self. You know what I mean? But I think when people talk about personal branding, yeah, I mean, it definitely feels more business savvy and more like, you know what I mean? Like business oriented in that sense, because it's like, okay, this definitely feels like you're selling me a product, you're selling me an image. And honestly, I feel like people feel that it feels a little bit restrictive. And I think when you talk about energy and you talk about business, to me, that sounds like that kind of stops the flow of currency coming in. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like, you're not really showing up. And then I think another thing that really interests me about a lot of the business advice that I've taken is it kind of sells you this idea of abundance. And, this is why when I just said like, making sure you have your understanding of what success is in life, because one thing I'm finding, like I said, it's like you think about America's dream and, all these different things. And it's like, yo, what if you don't want a white picket fence? What if you want a townhome? What if you want a brownstone? You know what I mean? Like, what if you want a greenhouse? You know what I mean? Like, so it's so funny when people talk about that, because it's like you find yourself pursuing the advice of so many people, but it's like you may not even want that. And so when I think about the abundance that is then sold to us through certain lifestyles, and I'm not talking about, success like in that way. I guess I'm more so talking about just generalized conversations around entrepreneurship. People are always talking about like, oh, you're going to make all this money. And it's really this idea that your life is going to be so full and abundant, when the reality is that you sacrifice so much, right? And so that brings me back to my main point about who I was becoming and how I was really losing myself along the way. And when you think about like paving your own way and creating your own path, that's something to really, really sit and consider. Because I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to really pave your own path and you're going to be somebody who's really authentic and like you're really going to show up, you got to be real. And like, honestly, I don't really think you're going to be able to take advice from everybody, because one thing I've learned is that everybody's got their different versions of success, And so back to what I'm saying, the common narrative for a lot of entrepreneurs, the ones that have garnered a platform and, can come back and teach people, and they may be wealthy. They may have reached a certain income tax bracket, but it's like they may not have certain things within their lives that you would consider, you know what I mean? And so I think that that's the thing. I think that like, all in all, I'm just saying, I think we may be kind of caught up in a universal idea about what success is and what it looks like to have a dream and to have achieved that dream, and I think it's really hard to be authentic and to be happy and to live your life in such a way to where you can attract what's for you and really have your ideal of abundance, right? Like, that's going to be really hard when you follow the blueprint of a lot of other people, because like I said, like, I feel like people will say my life is abundant. They have, these nice things. They have, you know what I mean? They may be out doing things in the world and it's maybe inspiring, right? We may see them, but it's like, okay, but if you're lacking in the health or you're lacking in relationships or you're you know what I mean? Is that worth it to you? And I had moments in my life where it was like I was really tempted and I kind of got a feel of who I had to become. And it's so crazy. It almost gives me like chills. I remember I was supposed to meet with it was a group of people essentially. And I'm just going to say this like vaguely. And we were supposed to work together on a project I was really excited about. I felt like it was a dream of mine. I was like, I'm going to do this, and as I was meeting with these people, things were popping off, you know what I mean? And I just knew in that moment, like, man, if I take this path, I'm going to have to become a person that I don't think I'm going to like, you know what I mean? And that sounds, if you listen to it and like really hear me, you're not going to hear that as like cowardice, but you're going to really sit and consider like who you're going to have to become. And I think for a lot of people, like I know sometimes, success narratives always kind of end with this like demise, right? And there's always kind of like this deception and people are like, oh, let's take, for example, Shark Tank, right? We know Oscar is like, oh, I just want to be at the top of the reef. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is what it is. And then he gets to the top of the reef. And there's Lola, and she's like, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a gold digger. I'm superficial. I'm superficial, yada, yada. It comes with all these problems. He's got all these people in his house he doesn't know. And it's like, we see that. And I think a lot of people are really comforted especially today, a lot of people are really comforted in the rise and falls of celebrities and those who are, very prosperous financially. And so I think but I think there's something said about that. And then it's like towards the end of the film, if you haven't seen Shark Tale, right, he's got Angie which is his friend who worked with him in the car wash. And she's like, I loved you when you were somebody to me, And so I more so say that to say, in today's world, especially with social media, especially with like, we're seeing a lot of different people in a lot of different spaces, you know what I mean? Like they're online, they're traveling, they're doing all these different things. You really got to sit and ask yourself, like, what does success mean to me? You know what I mean? But what does it mean to me? And I think there's really something said about your values and how, a lot of your frustration, a lot of your discontentment within yourself, a lot of, you know what I mean, your angst really comes from you not making decisions that are within your values. You know what I mean? Like when you do things and it doesn't align with your values, it's almost like you have a conviction within yourself. You can call that God. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like there's a conviction inside of you to where it's like you just know something's not right. Like, I've had podcast episodes that, I was a little embarrassed about. I felt like I had influence at the time around like a lot of religious leaders and things like that. And I just found myself really doing and saying a lot of things that weren't really within my values. And I think what's unfortunate sometimes about religion and, religious communities is that it could be a very strong conviction for you not to say that and for you not to do that. But it's almost like people say, well, the Bible, you know what I mean? And they'll come in and they'll kind of justify that. And it's like, well, no, I think the only commandment is that we are to love one another. You know what I mean? So it's like, you gotta really check yourself and like make decisions that are in alignment with your values. For example, if you value health and a healthy lifestyle, saying yes to going out every weekend is probably not going to be in your best interest. That's not probably going to bring you a sense of joy and satisfaction. And so it's like you wake up the next day and you feel like crap and you're self-loathing and you know what I mean? Or it's like if you say, I want to start this business. I want to do these things, but it's like, you're not doing the thing every day. You know what I mean? For whatever reason, like you're not starting, it's not happening. That's out of alignment with your values. It's going to be hard to have self-esteem in that. You know what I mean? A lot of young girls, young generations in general, younger generations say that they're struggling with confidence. And obviously this doesn't apply to, everyone. It's not a universal thing. I'm more so talking about those who are a little bit older. If you're struggling with low self-esteem and you're struggling with confidence, you have to really look at yourself and say, are my choices in alignment with my values? Like, for example, I know the common narrative, especially today as it pertains to success and just, modern therapy rhetoric, is to leave toxic family, right? Toxic family is the phenomenon. Like, that's just the biggest thing. And a lot of people think that, it's always other people who who are causing our demise and playing on our downfall. But when I tell you, when you take agency over your life, when you no longer decide to be a victim of everyone else, and when you decide that you're going to be someone who takes responsibility for your life, when I say your life is going to change drastically, and you're no longer going to feel this sense of bondage towards people. You're not going to feel this sense of animosity towards people. You know, some might call that forgiveness. I call it personal responsibility, you know, because it's like, one, back to what I'm saying about the whole thing about values. If you value your family, right, you have a strong value for family. This is the point where it's like, you need to figure out, what are your boundaries? You know, you need to, first of all, figure out what are your boundaries. Second, you have to ask yourself, okay, you know, what am I focusing on when I'm with my family? Am I focusing on these YouTubers, these strangers, these people who don't know me, who are telling me that my family is toxic, who are telling me, you know what I mean? Like, are you focusing on that? Or are you focusing on your values of family? You know, are you focusing on the things that matter to you? Are you focusing on, you know, the love and the shared, you know what I mean? Whatever it is that you guys have between one another, obviously. You know what I mean? Like, what is it that you're focusing on? And of course, please, you know, don't take this out of context. Like, this is not for people who genuinely do have very abusive family members and people who are not good for them. You know what I mean? Like, we've obviously seen that. So this is definitely not to be insensitive, but it's more so just to kind of raise this sense of awareness of where we are today and the level of influence that so many people have over our lives. I think that as much as we think that we are very independent in thought, and, you know, as much as we feel like we're engaging in self-help and we're engaging in self-improvement, we have to really be mindful, because it's like, when you have so many, you have to realize at the end of the day, this is a stranger. And back to my thing about like so many people coming online with a personal brand, right? Marketing it as authenticity. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that. So it's like, here you are entrusting someone, you know, to have advice or to be, you know, someone who speaks into your life. And it's like, this person's not even really authentic. Like, this is someone who's just showing up this way. And it's crazy because there was a point in time where we were aware of PR, right? And now everyone's kind of got their own PR. You know what I mean? And that, to me, I always thought that was so crazy, because I felt like I always showed up online and I was who I said I was, you know. The second thing I would say too about like your values, is something I had to learn along the way. If you value love, if you value compassion, like myself, you know, I value authenticity to the extent of like who I am. And to me, I'm a very loving person. I'm a very compassionate person. So, you know, we start talking about things like race and racism. I've definitely had my podcast episodes that didn't really land well. I felt like in a lot of ways it was something that I feel like I had to do. But looking back, hindsight, I do have a little bit of embarrassment, because what I found over the years was that first, let me say this. I definitely came to a point in my life where I had a sense of grievance for the way in which I grew up. Last year, I traveled to LA, and it just made me realize how growing up in Ohio, I was really deprived. Not only was I deprived from certain resources, right? So things such as like fresh fruit, you know, clean air, clean water, things like that, as far as like nutrition. But I was deprived of experiences, right? Cincinnati is not a very diverse place. Like, it's very much black and white. And prior to kind of like, modern times, right? When I'm talking about like fast forward 2020, you know, 2022, 2023 and beyond, there really was no social accountability for racism, you know? So I've experienced a lot of that, like in, you know, spaces and things like that. And, you know, being at work, you know, I've been, you know, fired like unjustly and just a lot of different things. So it's like, for me, that was my experience. And it's interesting because it's like when you go to other cities and you realize that like these people have always kind of had this level of like progression. You know what I mean? Like, obviously we know the LA riots, so we're not going to get too crazy here. You know what I mean? We're not going to get too crazy here. Okay. We're going, you know, let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it a stack. You know what I mean? It's very much real. But I more so say that to say that, you know, I realized all the ways in which I have been influenced to think the way I think and move the way I move and have the type of perceptions that I've had, and how that's been based on my environment. And yeah, there's been a huge grievance in that, because I feel like, man, you know, my life would have or could have been so different had I grew up somewhere else. But I mean, that's just kind of like a brief moment in time. I don't really think that's a place I stay. I don't sit in that space because first of all, we're moving forward. I mean, second of all, it's like you never know what God has for you. And I think for me, as someone who's always been very driven and very hardworking, I know that this is only temporary. Like this is it. You know what I mean? So I don't plan to stay here for my whole life. But, that's just something that I realized. I think growing up, definitely, in a very conservative space and dealing with the segregation, and the predominantly, white spaces and so forth, like that's a real thing. It's not really a city that's progressive. It's not really a city that caters to other groups of people. It's not diverse at all, actually. So I realized all the ways in which that shaped me. And today I was reading a book about intelligence. I'm kind of doing a little research in regards to giftedness and intelligence. And today I learned that, Black kids specifically, who grow up in northeastern parts of America, are like they test higher in terms of like their IQ test scores. And so that includes like New York, Pennsylvania, PA, all those different places. And I thought that was very interesting because obviously, New York is one of the most diverse places, right? And so it's like, I just thought that was pretty interesting, like to see that. And so I think the way we grow up, a person's cultural influences and all of that, like it just plays a huge role in how we think. And so you have to kind of get to a point in your life where you start to question things like, why you think that way. And I think, the beautiful thing about traveling, me coming into this area where it's like I'm in my financial bag, like, you know what I mean? Like heavy on the financial literacy. But it's like you get to that place in your life and you start to question things and you start to realize like, you travel, you see different things. It's like it's okay to change. It's okay to grow. And I think that's also why I'm so big on, everything that I'm saying as far as like really asking yourself, what is your version of success? Like I said, people, they climb the ranks, they do the things, but it's like, but do you value family? Do you value relationships? What kind of life do you want to live? Some people can live like that. Some people can move like that. And, it's this guy on YouTube. I really like his content. His name is, it's called Sprout. But I think it's spelled Sprout. And he just walks around asking, elders, what are their regrets in life and what are some of the mistakes and things like that. And there was this one guy, and obviously it spoke to me because the guy just so happened to be a writer. And he said, what are some of the things that, we prioritize? And, a lot of people he said, what are the things that we prioritize when we're younger, but don't really matter when we're older? And he just was talking about how, he was a writer, he wanted to pursue journalism. He said he really loved it. And he said, I didn't really make a lot of money, but I loved it, and it brought me a sense of joy and peace. And he said, my friends went on to work, Fortune 500 companies. And he's like, they made all the money. And he's like, but now they're at this place in their lives where they want to do things differently. He was like, they're saying that, now they're trying to pursue a dream, but he's like, we're in our 50s and 60s. He's like, it's, you don't have the time for that. Like, and he's not saying, he didn't say, I'm paraphrasing, but he didn't say like, you don't have the time for it. He's just saying like, trying to pursue a dream at 60 is kind of like too late. And I thought that was very profound because I think that, one thing I realized, and it's so crazy, man, I'm telling you, it's just like, it's all just coming back to me like full circle. I remember just seeing that in my own life, like witnessing that. And I was like, no, I think that what matters to me is family. I think that what matters to me is relationships. Now, let me say this too, because I know there's a lot of nuance. I would consider myself to be pretty disciplined. I don't always feel the need to go out. I don't always feel the need to sacrifice and bend over, but I'm saying that I know where my priorities are. You know what I mean? So I don't feel like I lean too far into leisure and relationships and things like that, but I know where my priorities are, and I think for me, if I was to, get all these things and it's like, I have no one to share it with, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's a huge like aha moment. You know what I mean? I think you definitely have to really sit and consider like what matters to you. I also think too, you talk about thinking in terms of abundance, don't limit yourself on your version of success. People say you can't have money without love, or, you know what I mean? And I have to disagree. I think that nothing comes all at once, unless God just wants to do that in your life, but I do think that if you can get your priorities right, and if you can move and do things that are in alignment with your values. And if you can be in alignment, you can certainly get what's for you. I've seen people be successful. I've seen people, pursue their dreams and have their spouses and have children and, go on and live a very beautiful life. I think the really cool thing about life is that everyone has their own dream. You know what I mean? Everyone has their own dream. Some people are like, hey, listen, I'm making some investments. Me and my family, we're going to be traveling for the rest of these years. I got money to put my kids up at school, or, you know what I mean? I'm going to homeschool my kids, whatever. Like, you have to realize that there's uniqueness in your path. You know what I mean? There's uniqueness or there should be uniqueness in what you would consider successful. And that's one of the things that I've been kind of trying to address. I kind of did it in like a short film kind of like way. It was kind of like a trial and error. I'm really proud of it. Honestly, I wrote it on my column. I said it's called America's Dream for Me and You. And it was kind of like a thriller, kind of like twist about these guys who were coming to classrooms and selling kids an idea about the American dream, handing them a pamphlet of cars and success and all these different images of success, right? The American dream. And they follow these kids, who graduate high school. They follow them throughout their years and they keep checking in with them, telling them, hey, listen, don't talk to your friends. Don't hang out with your family. Like you gotta, you want to achieve your dreams. And the kids are like, yes. And then they get to the point where they ask them, don't pursue your leisure. Don't pursue leisure. Don't pursue your hobbies. You want to follow your dreams. And now the students are older and the guy comes back and he's like, you want to still pursue your dreams? And they're old now. And so, finally the kid asks, right? The kid that is now grown. And I may be telling this story in not the best way. Again, I'm on this podcast to really learn how to articulate myself. So bear with me. But so now the guy comes and he asks again, like, okay, you want to achieve your dreams. And now the students, there's only 2 remaining, right? They're older and they say, well, what is the dream? We're old now. Like you've been telling us to give up all these different things and make all these sacrifices, but now we're old. So what is the dream? And he said, wow, I'm so glad you finally asked. The dream is, you're going to have these things and now you're going to go and you're going to actually be the person who goes to schools like I do. And I encourage people to pursue their dreams. And he says, it wasn't that the people who fell off, who said they weren't going to achieve the dream, he said, it wasn't that they weren't going to achieve their dreams. It just was they were going to go do something that aligned with their values, where you all kept saying yes when I asked you to give up your friends and I asked you to give up your family and I asked you to give up your hobbies. You all said yes. And none of you ever stopped to ask me what the dream was. But he says, you knew what the dream was. I didn't even have to tell you because you knew that it was materialism. It's a universal dream, right? And so I hope that gives you a little bit of a chill because as I was writing it, I felt so inspired to write that because I'm like, is this not the world that we live in today? Right? So many people sit in front of you and like, this is the dream, right? Achieve your dream. But it's like, everybody's got different dreams though. You know what I mean? And so I just thought that was so powerful. And that's why I love being a writer. I know I didn't necessarily convey that in the best way, but you know what? Bump that. We being confident all year. So if you want to read it, check it out on Medium. It's called America's Dream for Me and You by yours truly, Jane Leslie. And it's definitely one of my favorite pieces. Like, I really want to get into that. And I'm doing that now, like short stories type thing. But I thought that was just so profound because it's the truth. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you have to ask yourself, what is a dream for me? What is it that I really want? And you have to ask yourself, like people talk about making sacrifices and things like that. I don't always think sacrifices have to be, it can come in different forms. I'm kind of like a firm believer if you grow and change, things change. But one thing I've learned about relationships is that if you're looking for like the perfect person or the perfect people, you're going to be alone. You know what I mean? You're absolutely going to be alone. I'm not talking about romantically. I'm talking about in life in general, because guess what? People have insecurities, and nobody's coming with full package of perfectness. Now, of course, if you're dealing with like abusive people, just like low vibey, very negative, you know what I mean? Obviously it gets better and we should all hope for that. But it's like in terms of just dealing with the perfect human that is sometimes depicted or at least kind of developed in our minds when we think about like being around the quote unquote right people, right? Because I think to say being around the right people means that there are wrong people, which obviously there are wrong people if there's like moral failings within these people, or if these people are encouraging you to do really bad things. You know what I mean? But one thing I found is just like, there are no perfect people, And so I just think that like, and obviously this is more so in terms of trying to find people who are confident and things like that, because I think everybody has their insecurities, and so I don't know. I think, there's a lot of conversation to be had there. I don't want to speak too soon because, like I said, I do feel like you can meet better people if you like around people who are just not that great, but it's like when you really sit and think about that, like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? What do these people look like? Because I think a lot of times what it actually does is set you up to have this very high expectation. And I think it sets you up to look for people with your very carnal eyes, you know what I mean? And so you now, instead of this idea of better, you're looking for people who have more money, or you're looking for people who are, materially confident, or materialistically, you know what I mean? Or whatever the case may be. And like I just said, like, we know that people build personal brands, so it's like, now you're kind of I think you actually open yourself up to be a little bit more deceived, because it's like, you realize that, I don't know. What I found is that most people are carrying something. And, when you talk about abundance, that's why I say run your own race and walk your path. Because when you talk about abundance, it's like you have people who, are at a place in their life where they may have this materialistic abundance, but they're underdeveloped socially, right? They took this one track path, or this one, you know what I mean? But they're underdeveloped socially, you know what I mean? And so I think that's kind of what happens too, unfortunately, when you invest a lot of time in just like one thing, right? Instead of developing as a person, instead of growing as a person, instead of doing, self-reflective work and learning in relationships, right? Like how you show up and, you know what I mean? Taking some time to really introspect. I think you find yourself kind of in this space where you're very narrow-minded, and you may have that success, but it's like you're underdeveloped in other areas of your life. So that's kind of like the whole purpose of this video. This podcast is just to kind of say that, and to say Happy New Year. And, for this year, I hope you're setting your own goals. I'll give another example, something I'm very proud of. And me and my family were laughing about this. I'm a runner. So, for me, I started out walking. Obviously, I started out walking. I started out jogging. And now I run. I'm not going to tell you the miles I run, because quite frankly, I'm so proud, so I don't even really care to get into it, but I don't know why. It's like, I want to share, but I don't. But I'm a runner. So, for me, it's like, I think about how everyone is like gym, like the gym was a really big thing, like, coming up and talk about like fitness in terms of the fitness brands and everyone being on social media, and, everyone's like focusing on a certain type of body and like aesthetic and everything. And me, I'm a runner, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I just think that's my whole thing about like staying true to you and what does healthy look like for you. For me, I was never for, a lot of protein powders and things like that. I just don't really believe in all those different type of like chalky supplements for the sake of, trying to have my body look a certain type of way. I know there's vegan supplements. I'm not judging it. Like, I don't care to get into it. It's, to each his own. But for me, that was never my MO. You know what I mean? I'm just not about that. Like, I wasn't really here for that just to kind of change my body. It just was a no for me. But for some people, that's their thing, so it's like, this is what I'm saying. Like, as I wrap this up, is like, you have to do what is for you and what makes sense to you and what you want. And I think that's kind of what happens when you start setting your own goals. And, it's so funny with my entire podcast and with this work and how I've been trying to inspire other people, it's always kind of been like, I just want, and I think that's why I say like authenticity is something that I question today for a lot of people who have personal brands, because to me, it's like, I just would hope that by me showing up and doing me, you would just do you. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of always how I've operated. Like, I don't think that anything really needs to change. I don't think that, you know what I mean? I think by me showing up and me being who I am, you would then in turn feel comfortable enough to be who you are. And I've honestly seen that result in my real life. And that's just kind of how I do. You know what I mean? I think anything outside of that is just like, there's no point. I don't know. And I've seen people create the personal brand and honestly be trapped in that brand. I've seen people create, you know what I mean? And they're stuck in that, you know what I mean? And they're really, really stuck in that. And I think we kind of start to tell ourselves after a while, things to just kind of like massage ourselves, and so it's unfortunate because I think when you talk about success, it's hard to kind of critique success. You know what I mean? It's hard to, I think I just did that very gracefully, but I think it's hard to kind of like critique success and question success and what it means to be successful, because it's like, we live in a world today where it's like, everyone's like, oh, you're just being negative. You know what I mean? Like not really understanding, like, no, I'm just kind of questioning this. Like, I'm just trying to engage in this critically. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think as someone who has done all the things in terms of like the culture of like manifesting and, you know what I mean, doing all these different things, man, it's just like, I really just believe that there's really something about being in the world and being yourself, showing up, doing what it is that you love, following that, developing real world skills. You know what I mean? Like, I'm definitely someone who believes in hard work. So I'm still going to be frontward facing, like in the world working. I know online everyone's like, work smarter, but I just think there's really something said about, work ethic and a skill set that will just always be my approach, call that dated, call it whatever the case may be. Maybe that's just my values. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm a little too traditional. I don't know. But that's just how I roll. I believe in doing things like repetitiously. I don't really believe that, because I think you can believe all you want. I think you can have the attitude to be like, oh, I'm going to be, I'm going to meet this person. I'm going to do whatever. But it's like, if you don't have the skills to kind of navigate that, it's not going to matter. Right. So you can manifest the money, but if you don't have the skills, it's not going to matter. Or you can manifest the opportunity, but if you don't have the skills, right, you don't have that work ethic, you don't have that money management that requires real world, you know what I mean? Like work ethic in that sense, then it's not going to matter. The same thing with relationships. If you attract, you know what I mean, that person in your life, that pretty girl, that pretty guy in your life, that handsome guy in your life, then it's like, if you don't have the relational skills, you know what I mean? If you don't have a handle on you, if you don't have an understanding of you, if you don't have an understanding of people and relationships and just like the realities of life, right? That work ethic, going back to that reality, it really doesn't matter. I mean, like none of it matters. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. You can do all the things in your mind, but it's like, if you're not doing it in the world, it's not real. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't want to say it's not real to that extent of like a generalization, because we know obviously faith, right? To even have faith is to believe in, things that are forthcoming, like, and have hope in things that are obviously not seen. So it's like, I don't want to be general with that. I'm just more so saying, I've found in my life, the only way I was going to get results is if I was doing the work, period. You know what I mean? So I think that in a lot of cases, this mindset development, this personal development has kind of become somewhat of an incubator for a lot of people to kind of just generalize, for a lot of people who may have certain skills, may have certain advantages to kind of just sit online and pump out content, for people to just kind of like consume. And I think there's really something about advertising that has always premised on the evoking of emotion, and the relation, through emotion and positive reinforcement that has always kind of had a lot of people in a conundrum, right? It's kind of like when people are like, oh, take this weight loss pill and believe that, you know what I mean? And then it's like, well, it really doesn't matter. It's only going to happen if, you know what I mean? And obviously I don't want to be like, but like, you know what I mean? That's just an example that I'm giving. Like, I think at the end of the day, you got to do the work. Like I said, for me, regardless of what people say, I'm here for, making money online. I'm here for all that. But it's like, I know for a fact that to go online and be like, okay, I'm going to be a content creator, I'm going to be this person. If I'm not investing in the right cameras, the right production setup, it's not happening. People say things like, oh, just use your iPhone. Well, the funny thing about the iPhone is that the iPhone actually has a lot of cool features. That's the one thing that's really cool about iPhone. I think that's why we all love iPhone. And, there's actually at each Apple store, right? If you go online at Apple, they actually have a class where they can teach you how to use your cell phone to take pictures, like, you know what I mean? And so again, back to that work ethic, you know what I mean? Like, I believe in skills. I believe in work ethic. So I don't always, and I'm just saying this to you to share with anybody out there who, you maybe have been reading all the books, or maybe you have been, you know what I mean, doing all the things, but like, you're not getting the results. And it's because the results are going to come from you actually doing it. So it's like, it really doesn't matter. And then I think that environment and realism, right? Reality, real world experiences have a way of transforming your mindset, right? For me, I didn't need to listen to a manifestation podcast before I went to LA to see the ways in which that if I lived in LA, or I'm sorry, to notice the ways in which if I lived in LA, my life would be different. My life could be different. You know what I mean? I didn't need to listen to certain things to go to New York to develop a work ethic. You know what I mean? Because New York just kind of has the spirit of work ethic. You know, it has the spirit of like tenacity. You know what I mean? It has a spirit of resiliency. So it's like, I didn't need to listen to anything to get that. You know what I mean? So I just think that we really sell ourselves short with this overconsumption of content, and we sell ourselves short with this overconsumption of like success. You know what I mean? And like I said, you know, the way people do things is so crazy because nobody really tells you the truth. I had a guy, actually, I was talking to him about, you know, some things I had going on, some projects I wanted to do. And, you know, it's funny because it's like the more you get out there in the real world, the more you just kind of can see through like smoke and mirrors, and like the more you start to see what's real. And that's kind of what I want to encourage people. Like, you got to get out in the real world because there's something about social media that, you know, it's very disingenuous. And a lot of people throw that word around like authenticity, but they're not being real. You know what I mean? And now, because it's so close in proxy with the possible real, or because you can emulate the real, you can emulate authenticity. People got all different kinds of formulas and, you know, all different kinds of people they emulate and, you know, kind of like replicate. Right, because we know success doesn't always have to be something that's authentic. You know, quite frankly, I think if you take the authentic route with success, it's actually going to take you a lot longer versus if you don't reinvent the wheel, you know. So I think when you are someone who is really on your own path, you're going to look up and feel like you're not successful, but it's like yours is going to come, but it's probably not going to come in that form because it's like you're going to get yours because it's in alignment with you. You know what I mean? Your breakthrough is going to come and it's in alignment with you, you know, and the Bible talks about this too, like how God gives us riches without any sorrow. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I believe, you know? So it's like, you have to understand that. Cause like I said, I just, you know, it's crazy. I kind of went on a tangent, but you know, I really believe that. Like, I really see that in a lot of people, you know? And so I think this is another thing too. As I conclude this, I know I mentioned just how I was really reluctant to say that I was an entrepreneur. I want to say that, you know, for anybody who is thinking about entrepreneurship, or, you know, you have something that you may be considering monetizing, you know, don't be in such a rush. You know what I mean? That's one thing I've learned. Like, and I know that sounds like, you know, but really hear me, like really, really hear me when I say that, you know, don't be in such a rush to put your business out there. Don't be in such a rush to just do the thing. You know, I came across 2 businesses today. Over the weekend. And they were just very underdeveloped. You know, I didn't really understand what I was looking. You know, one business had products on the page, but it was like coming soon. You know, this was like a launch post. You know, it was like, you know, sign up for the email. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, people, I think this, and I don't believe in that, right? I don't believe in this idea of like, just start. You know, I don't believe in that. You know, I think that you need to get certain things in order before you start. And this is the thing, like so many people tell you just start, but I know someone specifically that I followed and, you know, and hear me out too, because I'm not going to obviously say their name, but you know, when I reference people, I try to use a lot of things as like a learning example, like a learning type of thing. You know, I really don't like the culture today. People come on, they share their authenticity and their vulnerability, and people will do like a remix on their content and be like, oh, well, when you said this, because didn't you say your husband? I don't like people like that. I just think that's what I'm saying too with social media. It really robs people of their humanity. You know, that's why it's like, I've always kind of been reluctant to do the online platform thing because I don't like that. I don't get down with that. You know, that's why it's like, you know, you have to, okay, let me not get on my, let me not veer too far left. Okay. Let me bring it back around. But, you know, this was someone who was saying like, you know, really advocating for the message of just starting, when it's like, you know, this person also shared how they had saved money and they had these investments of like a couple thousand, you know what I mean, saved, and they really invested in this thing before they started, you know. So I don't think that people do it intentionally as far as like hypocrisy. I think a lot of people want to be inspirational and a lot of people want to kind of come from that space and inspire others, you know, with their content. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. Like, obviously, I think it's done in good faith, but it's very misleading. You know what I mean? Because you absolutely should not just start. And that doesn't mean procrastinate. It just means that like, realize when you don't have a certain skill set and go get that skill set, period. You know what I mean? Realize when something is not right in this area and go do that. Don't just start something off the sake of like saying that you started, because there's nothing worse than, it's like you're really setting yourself up to fail. And I think that obstacles are going to come your way and failures are going to come your way, and that's cool. You know what I mean? So like, just let that be, but don't kick yourself in the foot. You know what I mean? Like, don't kick yourself, and don't set hurdles in front of your way. You know what I mean? I think that right there is discouraging. And I think the journey of entrepreneurship in itself is going to come with those pitfalls. So at least, you know what I mean? At best, rather, you would at least want to kind of set yourself up for success. And I think that really comes from really taking the time to prepare. And, you have to ask yourself, what is the rush? I think a lot of people are in a rush to kind of create these online brands. But from what I've learned, as you can clearly see, this is like my 4th podcast at this point. You learn and grow and you change. And I think for me, I'm really good at figuring out, what is it that I want to share with others? What is it that I'm, what I mean, before I go and just create that thing, you know what I mean? Like I said, I don't want to be misunderstood in that, because I do value authenticity. Like I said, we had some conversations, but looking back, hindsight, I might have offended some people. And for me, as someone who really is compassionate, the more I see the world, the more I have an understanding of people, and, you know what I mean? Perspectives change, and it's just like, that hurts me to know that I would, it hurt somebody. So, you live and you learn, but I just say that to say, like, take your time, you know what I mean? Because I think you have a lot of growing to do. And I just don't really see what the rush is. Like, I think you can move with a sense of intentionality, and you can move with a sense of purpose. And I think when you keep those values in a line, right? Like, you know what I mean? You're in alignment. So it's like, it's going to happen for you eventually. But I think when you just are like super hasty and you're like, I got to start this thing, or I want to start this thing, and it's like, it's not really making any sense, you just kind of come up short. And like I said, with entrepreneurship, there's a lot of skills that I think come with entrepreneurship that have to be acquired, like, period. You know what I mean? So it's just like, take your time. Another thing I would say too, as I close out with this, is, take everything with a grain of salt. One thing I've learned from my experiences with traveling and seeing people with different businesses and different niches and things like that, and everyone having their own interests, their own skill set, their own personal whatever, yada, yada, is everything is not going to apply to you. You know what I mean? Like, everything is not going to apply to you. I used to be someone, I would indulge and I would engage in certain content, and I'd be like, oh man, maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I do need to go back and do this, or maybe I need to go back and do that. And it's like, not everything is applicable to you. You know what I mean? So it's like, you have to kind of take a step back when you hear things and, like, question it. Like I said, for me, I would just always kind of notice how I would just talk myself out of things, because I was like, oh man, this person's like, I need to have X amount saved before I start that business, or, you know what I mean? Whatever the case may be. And I would get discouraged and I would kind of just like fall back. So it's like, you kind of want to make sure that, whatever it is that you're starting, like, it's tailored to you, right? Like, if you're someone, maybe, I don't even know anything about gaming, so I don't know why I was going to use that as an example, but it's like, whatever business that you're starting, like, I think for me with books, for example, with Amazon KDP, that's a pretty low startup cost, right? Like, it didn't take much to kind of get my business up off the ground. You know what I mean? Although I did invest in having like a photographer for my images online, and, you know what I mean? I did buy a camera and things like that. So it's like, there was definitely an investment there. So I'm not going to make it seem like it took no money, but I'm more so saying that to say, with whatever it is that you do, there is a startup cost. And because I think a lot of people are building a personal brand and they put you all in a category to say, well, let me not say you all, because obviously me too, but it's like, they'll put us in a category, which is okay, right? Like, I'm not demonizing success. I want to make that very clear. Like, I'm not on this wave of attacking celebrities. I'm not on this wave of, I don't agree with that. But I'm saying this to say, because a lot of people are online, right? A lot of people have come in with this understanding that I need a target audience, right? We know that niching was like the buzzword 2020 and, today, right? So people are really taking these very old strategic business models, and what they're doing is saying, hey, look, I know that this brand is, for people who want to start a business, who don't have any money, or who may, be of a certain demographic. So what they're saying is they're appealing to your needs, but they're not really giving you the full truth of the matter, and so it's like, they'll come and they'll be like, oh, let's say, for example, it's like, I know the one big one was the clothing brand, right? And anybody who's ever started a clothing brand or who has ever done a clothing brand, I'm not talking about upselling. I'm talking about like full blown clothing brand. No, that it's going to cost you a couple hundred, unless you can do some of the things yourself. Like a clothing brand is a pretty lucrative thing. Like it definitely is going to cost you. It's going to cost you some money. Like I said, unless you do the things yourself. So a lot of people are like, you can start a clothing brand with $0, and it's like, that's not possible, And so it's like, I'm not here to say it's not possible, because obviously anything is possible, but low key it's impossible, So it's like, I just say that to say it's okay to take it some time, pause, get your ducks in the row. And I think the reason why a lot of people gravitate towards these brands that sell certain ideals is because instead of you finding the samples, doing all these different things and like kind of doing that work, right, that hard work that really comes in, when it comes to starting a business or whatever, a clothing brand or whatever, it's easy to just kind of like buy into someone else's ideals when you see the fruits of their labor. What you didn't see is all the things they went through on the back end. You know what I mean? So it's just like, there's a lot that goes into that. And then I think the downside, of course, too, with the personal branding sometimes is people can be very negative, right? Like I've seen, people talk about how their business is doing very successful, but how, they're not paid a lot and how they don't eat and how, they're like, people aren't seeing all the negative things that go on the back end. And don't get me wrong, I obviously, entrepreneurship is a very challenging thing, but I do think, again, people have this way of kind of like demonizing and very much like negatively stigmatizing success. And I think that that's not very aspirational. So I don't know. As this podcast concludes, I want to ask you guys, or at least ask yourselves, sit with this question. What makes a person inspirational? What is it that makes someone inspirational? Like, what do you feel like, makes someone inspirational? Is it the way they make you feel? Is it, their story? Is it what they've accomplished? Like, what is it about this person that you find inspirational? Because quite frankly, I think a lot of people want to be inspirational, but I don't think a lot of people are inspirational. I think a lot of people can sell you aspirations, but back to this whole thing about success and what does it mean to you, right? We have been conditioned to believe that success is a very universal ideal. It's a very universal standard. And so that's exactly what everyone strives for. But, if you are someone who maybe grew up materialistically blessed, maybe your ideas of success is different, right? We see this with people who are out in our oceans doing incredible work. You know what I mean? We see this in people who are, really big on like climate change and science and, you know what I mean? What is the science that studies the weather? It starts with a G. I don't know what I was going to say. I don't even know. I'm going to lose my train of thought. I can't even think about it. I can't even think about okay, whatever. If you're in that field, so it's like, figure out what the dream is for you. And as we move into content creation and beyond, ask yourself, what is it about a person that makes them inspirational? What is it about this person that you gravitate to? What about this person makes them inspirational? And I think that's a really, really, that's a big thing. Is it their work ethic? Is it what they've been able to do in their lives? Is it their story? What about this is inspirational? Because I think a lot of times we're being sold aspirations that are very universal. And I don't think that is oftentimes in alignment with us. And I do believe that this is why we can never really get enough and we tend to overconsume. And now we have about several different podcasts and several different people who listen to us. And so, you know what I mean? Because it's like, we're not inspired. I think inspiration is when something really speaks to you and it's like you can hear something and then you take that with you and you carry it and you move on. And it's like, okay, that was inspiring. That's going to stick with me. And I come back and I recite that. And that's kind of like a seed that was planted in my soul, whereas aspiration is like, I'm constantly striving for it. I'm constantly consuming because I need this feeling, I need this boost in this high, right? Or to get me to this idea of like a higher lifestyle or whatever, you know what I mean? I need something to fill me up in that extent. And I think that's the difference between like motivation and inspiration. So that's just something I want you guys to ask yourself. Who inspires you? Peace.